Today I'm making cornbread dressing, the way our family has made it for years. I learned how to make dressing when I was in my early 20s, just where we could have it at our house. But it's not something that you usually depend on your grandparents to get it made, or your parents. My oldest son does not live here, and for 2 years in a row, at least, maybe 3, he has asked for cornbread dressing recipe. And so this video is special for Cameron. It's special for my other kids too. I'm sure they'll want to make it themselves one day, but right now they eat it when I make it, but now Cameron can't. So this is a special video for Cameron and all of you out there that would like to learn how to make Southern style cornbread dressing. Okay, the first thing you're going to do to make dressing is to make cornbread. And to make cornbread, this is for a double batch of dressing, so I'm using 4 cups of cornmeal, 2 cups of flour, I don't put any sugar in my cornbread that is for dressing. 2 teaspoons of salt. 2 tablespoons of baking powder. Alright, so that was 2 cups of flour, 4 cups of cornmeal, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And I'm going to stir that up a little bit. Get it mixed in good. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and add 3 cups of milk. And if you're not making a double recipe, you can always split this in half. I've just doubled it for today. My goal is to have dressing left over that I can freeze for Christmas. If I don't have any left over, that's okay, but if I do, less work at Christmas. This is Thanksgiving, so. All right, there is my 3 cups of milk. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 cup of butter. And now 4 eggs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mike should have used a bigger bowl. And I kind of try and beat this up a little bit to kind of beat the eggs before I start mixing it in my other stuff in the bottom. I should have already said I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. I like to go over my ingredients as I'm doing it, make sure I don't forget anything. So I know I've done the flour, cornmeal, salt, and baking powder, and I added my milk, eggs, and butter. So all I have to do is finish mixing this and get it in the oven. I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes and check it. Make sure, and because this will be the first time you're doing it, you might want to set your timer for 20 minutes to make sure, you know, your oven may cook a little faster than mine. It would have been better to have a bowl, a more flat bowl than this tall bowl. I'm having a hard time mixing it in together. In fact, I think I'm going to switch to a spoon. I always mix up stuff with a fork. I don't know why, but that's just the way I've always done it. But see, it's kind of thick on the bottom, and I'm not able to get that up with the fork because it's so much. Now, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take my baking spray and I'm going to spray my pan. And I really don't know what size pan this is. It's a big one. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to it. I'm going to go ahead and get this in the oven. Like I said, that was a 400-degree oven, and I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. You might want to check yours after 20. Okay, while I have my cornbread in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and get my broth started. I do all my broth homemade. We used to buy a canned gravy called chicken giblet gravy. I can't find it anymore, so I make it myself. And the way I do that, this is frozen. This is from some chickens we slaughtered. This is actually 2 hearts, 2 gizzards, a liver, and a neck. And so I put it in a pot. And I'm going to add a half of an onion and a little piece of celery. That adds flavor. And I'm just going to cover that with water. Some water will probably cook out. That ought to be enough. And I'm going to add salt. So this is for the chicken giblet gravy that I'm going to make. And I'm going to put that over there on the stove to get going in just a minute. And then one thing I found last year, me and my sister made dressing together, and I've written it down. I actually had a bunch of necks, and I still have some chicken necks, and that makes a great gravy. And so I'm going to do, I don't have enough chicken necks to do it all out of chicken necks, so I'm going to do that. I am putting them in a separate pot from my chicken because they have little bones, so I may have to strain this. And also, I didn't mention, I'm going to take these pieces of onion and celery out because I don't like big chunks in there. But it's going to go in there now, and I'm going to do the same thing and cover this with water. And then, like I said, this is to make a nice rich broth. If I have any broth left over, I will freeze it and use in other recipes. So, you know, I'm not worried about having too much broth. More of a worry is having too little broth. I'll put that over there. And then for my main broth for my dressing, I have about 15 chicken thighs in here. And with the meat, I may put some meat in the dressing because we're going to have turkey. Sometimes I just add the meat into the dressing, but this time I probably won't, and I'm probably going to have extra broth, so I'll probably freeze some to make chicken and dumplings and chicken pot pie and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this with water also. And I can always add more water. This was 8 cups of water here, and I think I will add about another 4 more cups of water. Now I'm going to put a whole onion in here. Onion and celery bring out the flavor, and it adds flavor too. And this is about a whole stick of celery. You could have put 2 sticks of celery in it. I'm running short on celery. And so then you're going to salt this. You want to have this go. You could do this before the cornbread, but I'm just getting this going while the cornbread is cooking. So I'm going to have that going, and the cornbread will be cool for me to work on it once this is ready. I actually cooked my cornbread for 20 minutes also, so you need to make sure you do set your timer. It turned out beautiful. And I'll let this be cooling while everything else is cooking. All right, another thing to have going while you're doing this is melt 2 sticks of butter. So that'd be a cup. And you're going to saute onions, 2 large onion or 4 small, and 3 stalks of celery. Or is it called ribs of celery. You'll want to saute that, and the way I do it is I put it in, you know, I chop it up small and I don't want any crunch. I want it sauteed completely. But if you're not real careful, you can actually burn stuff when you're sauteing. So it's not something you want to do very fast. And so what I do is I get it in here. Of course, you saw the butter was already melted. I've already got the fire turned down as low as it'll go. And I have a little thing that I can put on this gas stove if it's cooking too fast to raise it up to where it cooks even slower. And then what I do is I put a lid on it. And like I said, you're not going to rush this. And you may want to stir it every now and then. And if it's starting to brown, it needs to be even lower. So, and just let that saute. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and cut up one bunch of green onions because that's what'll go into the dressing when we're making it. So I already have them cut up. So I'm going to cut my green onions up. While I'm chopping my green onions, I'm going to go ahead and start my Instant Pot. You'll want to have 6 boiled eggs, and I use my Instant Pot for that. So I'm going to put my eggs in on the rack, and I'm going to add 1 cup of water. Place my lid on, and you'll cook them on manual for high pressure for 5 minutes. And then once that's done, make sure you close off your vent. Once they've done cooking for 5 minutes, you turn it off and set your timer for 5 minutes. Let them sit in there 5 minutes, and then cool them in water as long as you need to, and they're ready to peel. All right, everything is still cooking nicely. My onions are starting to become opaque, and that's what I'm looking for. I want them nice and tender. I didn't tell y'all a time limit on the necks and the giblets and the chicken, but it's 30 to 45 minutes and it should be done. I've got my green onions cut up. My eggs are actually cooling, and now I'm going to cook my rice. I'm going to need 1.5 cups of rice. And I use my Instant Pot book. I use that for the eggs too. And so I'm gonna, so it's a serving size for 3 because that's gonna be 1.5 cups. So I'm gonna use 1/4 cup of rice and 1 cup of water. And I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna sprinkle a little salt in there. And then put my 1 cup of water. And I always get my Instant Pot book out because I'm scared I'm going to do it wrong. But what you do is you got to close your vent, and you're going to do high pressure for 3 minutes, and then natural pressure release, which means once it's done, I turn it off and let the pressure come down normally. If you don't have an Instant Pot, you can do your rice on the stove. But as you can see, I have my stove filled up. So you could actually have cooked your chicken and everything in the Instant Pot too, which would have been a little faster. So I'm going to do manual, 3 minutes, and my vent's closed, and it'll be ready in just a minute. Okay, I've got my chicken and my giblets and my necks cooked, and right now I'm going to make a roux that's going to go in my chicken giblet gravy. That's what's going to make it gravy, and I'm going to use 1/4 cup of oil and 1/4 cup of flour, and I'm going to make a roux to go in my gravy. And I'm going to do this on a low heat. I want to make a dark roux, but you've got to be very careful with roux because they burn easy. I still have my onions and celery sauteing. I'm doing them on a very low heat where they won't burn, and they're almost ready, but not quite. So, all right, now I'm going to be right here, so I'll be able to watch this roux. I'm going to go ahead and remove my stuff out of my liquid. And this is my giblets right here. And honestly, I don't know how long I've cooked them, but I cooked them. So, and you're going to want to keep your giblets in a different place as you take it out. I won't be using all of the liver in the dressing because it can be a little overwhelming. If you're one that likes a lot of liver taste, you can. I do use all of the gizzard and the hearts. So, and I will put these onions with my giblets because I will puree them. I will puree the my giblets in a food processor, and I will add that to the dressing. And this is optional. You don't have to put this gravy, you don't have to make this gravy and put in there. It's just what we've always been used to, so I always do it. Here's my nicks, and they're done. And they've stayed together, so I don't feel the need to strain my liquid. If I would have cooked them way too long, they would have maybe had some little bones in there. And and then I'm putting these onions over there too. Now also, if your family's not crazy about onions, onions do add a good taste. And I'm going to be pureeing these so nobody will know they're in there. But if you just don't like onions and don't like the flavor it gives, you don't have to use it. It does add flavor to it. And here's my thighs that I cooked. I have before actually pureed some of the chicken and put in my dressing too. So, you know, just whatever you think you would like. And if this was going to be, if I wasn't having turkey, like I said, I would use pieces of this meat in the dressing, so that way I wouldn't have to have a separate meat. Need to stir the roux because it will get brown on the bottom first, so you have to keep it stirred really good. Okay, now that's done. My rice is done. I'm waiting for it to, the pressure to come down naturally on that. And what I'll start doing now is working on my cornbread. It's in one slab, and we want to crumble it up. It's almost time to mix the dressing, so. And I also like doing my dressing a day ahead. I won't bake it today. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. And I like doing my dressing ahead, one day ahead. And you can even do it a few days ahead because the flavors have a chance to blend. But you see that I'm just crumbling this. Oh, I wanted to show y'all. It was like this on the other end too. Look what happens to the corners of my cornbread. They disappear. That's my favorite part of the cornbread. So, of course, I've got to taste the cornbread to make sure it's good. And so, I always taste the corners. But I just crumble up the cornbread like this. It's nice and cool now. I'm smelling my roux. I think I may need a bigger pan for my dressing. I was thinking I would put it back in this pan, but I'm thinking this pan might not be big enough now that I'm fluffing up the cornbread. because I have a lot more stuff to go in here. You want to make sure these brown spots, they're broke up pretty good, because you don't want a chunk of, I don't want a chunk of cornbread in my dressing. I like it all blended together. Okay, the roux will take a few more minutes to cook, and I'm going to go ahead and peel my eggs and cut my eggs and have them ready. And I'm going to have 6 eggs in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get to doing that now, and while I'm watching my roux. All right, now I'm heating up my giblet gravy again. It's cooled off a little bit, my broth actually. And then here is my roux. It's nice and brown. So I'm going to add that to my pot. Stir that up good, and as it heats up, it'll thicken some. And here's my giblets that I pureed in the I actually had to use a blender because my food processor bowl is messed up due to human error. But this is 1 heart, 2 gizzards, and half of the liver. I'm just going to add that back to the gravy, and I did have to add a little broth in here, and also this is some of the celery and onion in there. But you see that I pureed it really, really fine because, you know, I typically don't eat gizzards and liver and stuff like that, but it does add flavor, but I definitely would not want to munch into a piece of it. So, we're just going to mix that up like that. And we have everything waiting to go into the dressing right now. I believe the rice may be finished. And I still haven't chopped my eggs. I'm going to chop my eggs as I'm waiting for this to get ready. It'll thicken up some. And it doesn't have to be really thick. And I've got my onions and celery turned off. I'm going to take the lid off and let that be cooling a little bit. The rice is ready. So as I'm waiting on this gravy to thicken up a little bit, I'm going to chop my eggs right here. And the way I chop the eggs is they just need to be diced. And there are some people that add raw eggs. If that's what you would prefer to do, that's perfectly fine. That just, you know, you have to make sure it's cooked, you know, and it should be in the oven. My mother-in-law always put raw eggs in hers. My family always did boiled eggs. So either one, both had eggs. So. Where's my spoon? There it is. Oh, and by the way, I have went through and I've tasted, now that everything is done, I've tasted each one of my gravies and to make sure they're salty enough, and they are, so they are ready to go in and when this gravy's done. And I wanted to add in too, I've made sure that I've cleaned my counter in between each thing. Typically I wouldn't have laid my meat on the counter. I was doing that more for the video, where you could actually see me putting it in the pot and everything. Typically I don't lay the raw meat on my counter. Since I did clean it very good in between filming, because there is a chance of getting salmonella and other diseases from raw chicken. You have to be very careful. I've often thought about dressing and how somebody came up with the idea of it, and then as I get to thinking about it, you know, there's cornbread in it, there's rice in it, there's eggs in it, there's chicken broth in it. I think it was something that was thrown together as a leftover. I think, because we always have leftover rice, you know, and different stuff like that. So, okay, now after these eggs are boiled, we will be ready to mix it. Cut. I'm sorry. After they're cut, we'll be ready to mix our dressing. Okay, now that I have everything completed, it's time to mix the dressing. And I like to mix my dry ingredients first. And had I not been made so much, I would mix right in this pan, but I don't think I'm going to have enough room, so I'm going to put it in my big dish pan. My big dish pan that I don't do dishes in, I do food in. So. All right, I'm going to set this back here. And remember, my goal was to be able to have enough cornbread for Christmas, dressing for Christmas too, so I'm hoping that'll happen. As I turned it over, I see some chunks, and so I'm just trying to break those up. And when I say dry ingredients, I mean I'm going to mix my eggs in here and my rice. And y'all, I worked at a restaurant, so I do use my hands. They're clean hands, always clean hands, but if you eat out at restaurants, most likely you're having food that's been, people's used their hands with too. Sorry to tell you that. But anyway, now this is my 6 boiled eggs that I've chopped up in small pieces. And put that in. And this is my 1½ cups of rice, cooked rice. Okay. All right, now I'm just going to mix all this together where it's all mixed good. I guess one thing that I don't mix up that's kind of like a dry ingredient would be my green onions. We always put them in last. I don't know why, but that's what we do. So, and as I see bigger chunks of cornbread, I'm just going to break them up with my hands. And you definitely wouldn't want any chunks of rice. If you see any of your rice sticks together, break that up too. Okay, now I want to make sure I get all of my chicken giblet gravy in, so I'm going to add that first. And that turned out nice. And then I'm going to put my gravy that I did my chicken neck broth. And remember, you don't have to use chicken necks. It just makes a tasty gravy. Oh, I want to get my my onions and my celery that's sauteed in 2 sticks of butter and get that in there. And what I'm looking for is a pretty soupy mixture, because the cornbread is going to absorb a lot of this broth, and then you're going to actually bake it the day you're going to eat it. And so since tomorrow's Thanksgiving, I'm going to, once I get this made up, I'm going to put this in the refrigerator, unbaked, and overnight, and the flavors will really blend good. And then I will bake it in the morning. All right, now you see, it's kind of getting a drier texture. It's not dry. I know it still looks moist, but I want it to be more soupy. So now I'm going to add in my extra broth that I made with the chicken thighs. And so there's no real measuring of the exact amount. Now, if you're not into making your own broth, you can use chicken bouillon, you can use bought canned broth, or they have it in the carton now. I'm going to tell the truth though, homemade broth is much better. So, but if if you're in a pinch or you just don't want to do all the cooking of the stuff and everything, you can do that. All right, now that's pretty soupy, but it's still absorbing pretty good. And here's the thing, you'll bake it, everything in here is cooked. So really, you just have to bake it till it gets good and hot. And through and through. If you put raw eggs, you would have to make sure you cook it long enough for the raw eggs to get done. I'm gonna add a little more broth because as the liquid evaporates, it will really make it good and tasty. So, and if you put it in the refrigerator overnight and you see that it absorbs all the broth, you can always add more broth to it before you bake it. But I'll take some of that broth and make a gravy because Tommy likes gravy on his dressing. So now I'm pleased with this. Can you look at the camera? Mm-hmm. Can you see how soupy that is? Mm-hmm. It's very, very soupy. Okay, now I'm gonna add my green onions. And this is one bunch of green onions chopped. And if your family's finicky about seeing green things in their food or whatever, you know, you're welcome to leave out the green onions. I do think it adds a flavor too, so. Well, I mean, I know it does, but, you know, it may be something that your family doesn't like, and that's fine. And dressing takes a little while to do, but it's not hard. It's not hard at all. All right, I tasted it a while ago. All my broth and everything has plenty of salt. But I want to taste my dressing to make sure. But it should be plenty salty too. That's good. Okay, so now I'm going to put it back in my pan. And I hope I have too much to go in my pan, where I can have some in the freezer already. Looks pretty good. We're not having a huge crowd for Thanksgiving, so I think I'm going to stop it at that and look at what I have left. So I have plenty left for Christmas, and I'll put this in a pan. I'll probably put it in a throwaway like tinfoil pan, and that way yeah, I think this is going to be plenty, maybe another spoon or two. That way, and I'll put it in the freezer just like this, and so I can just take it straight out the freezer, let it thaw, and get it in the oven. So, and I may have some of this left too for Thanksgiving, I mean for Christmas, but we'll see. Another thing is that I like to cover my dressing with tinfoil while it's baking, and once it's good and hot, then I uncover it and go for and where some of the moisture can evaporate and go for the dry, I don't know the correct word, but like the dryness that you want of the dressing. Some people prefer a more moist dressing. Some people prefer a dry dressing. And I'm out of, nope, I'm not out. And so anyway, I always cover my dressing when I bake it. You bake it on 350 for, I would look at it in about 30 minutes and give it a good stir. If you're ready, if it's good and hot, you might want to go ahead and take the tinfoil off and let it bake for another 10 or 15 minutes where it gets a little brown on top. But just whatever your liking is, whether you like a dry dressing or a moist dressing, that would be determined on how long you bake it without the tinfoil. Well, I mean, it's time consuming to make dressing, but nothing's hard about it. And, you know, if you can make cornbread, if you can boil chicken, you know, if you can cut up an onion, you can make cornbread dressing. A lot of people do things different. I don't put any sage in mine. I don't put raw eggs. I put boiled eggs. There's lots of different little variations. Some people put some bread in theirs along with the cornbread. I don't. So, I mean, there's no one right 100% way. If you've never made dressing, try it. Add your own personal flair to it of what you like. One variation that's really close within our family is my mother-in-law always put a lot of pepper in her dressing, black pepper, and it really changes the flavor. And that's the way Tommy prefers it. Also, she made her dressing more dry. My mama made it more moist. And so, you know, there's all different little variations within families or extended families or whatever. So, you know, there's all kind of different ways that you can change it. One thing I love to do is when we're having pork chops and I have leftover dressing, to serve dressing and pork chops. I just think those flavors are wonderful together. So, Try different things. Try my way, try your way, and let me know in the comments some of the different things you've tried or the different ways you like dressing. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving or Christmas or day, whatever reason you're making dressing.